Sam lived on the edge of a wide, peaceful lake. For years, he had cared for the water, the trees, and the old stone dam that controlled the lake's level. The dam was not large, but it was strong. His grandfather had helped build it, and Sam had learned how to keep it in good shape. He liked the quiet sound of water slipping through the gates, the soft mist in the mornings, and the way fish jumped near the shore when the sun rose. Sam lived a simple life. He had a small cabin on the hill, a wooden dock, and a boat tied with a faded rope. The lake was his pride. Every season, he checked the dam, cleared branches, and oiled the old gears. Few people cared about it, but Sam knew the dam kept the lake full and the land safe from sudden floods. He never thought much about it. To him, it was just part of his life, the way some people mowed their lawns or fixed their fences. But things began to change. A group of people from the city had started coming to the area. They spoke about growth and opportunity. They said the lake was a perfect spot for vacation cabins. They formed a homeowners association, or HOA, though none of them had lived there long. They bought land near the shore, held meetings, and soon they began acting like they owned the whole lake. At first, Sam ignored them. He thought they would build a few homes and then leave him alone. But the HOA had bigger plans. They wanted to build 120 cabins along the lakefront. They wanted docks, roads, and signs. They wanted rules about who could fish, who could swim, and even what kind of boats could be on the water. Sam listened quietly during one of their meetings. A tall man in a shiny suit stood at the front and said, "This lake is now the centerpiece of our community. We will manage it with care, but also make it a place of profit. Families will rent cabins. Tourists will come. Everyone will benefit." Sam raised his hand. His voice was calm, but firm. "Who gave you the right to say this is your lake?" The room went silent for a moment. Then the man smiled in a practiced way. "Sir, this is a community project. We voted on it. The HOA represents the property owners here." "I didn't vote," Sam said. "You're not a member," the man replied smoothly. "But you will still benefit from what we are doing." Sam left the meeting without another word. He felt the eyes of the crowd follow him. Some looked nervous, others annoyed. He knew then that trouble was coming. The weeks passed, and construction crews arrived. They cut trees, poured cement, and laid gravel roads. Trucks brought in lumber and steel. The sound of saws and hammers filled the air. Where Sam once saw herons by the water, now he saw piles of logs and bulldozers. The HOA posted new rules on wooden boards. One rule said no one could fish without a paid permit. Another rule said only approved boats could use the lake. Sam's old wooden boat was not on their list. Neighbors came to Sam and whispered their worries. "They're changing everything," one old woman said. "They told me I have to paint my house the same color as theirs or I'll get a fine." Another man said, "They're charging us for parking on our own land. Can you believe it?" Sam listened, but he spoke little. He knew the HOA was growing bold. They thought the lake was theirs, but none of them had asked who controlled the dam. None of them even mentioned it. One morning, Sam walked to the dam with his tool bag. He checked the gears and the gates. He touched the cool stone with his hand. He thought about his grandfather's stories, how the dam had saved the valley during heavy rains long ago. The lake was only here because of it. Without the dam, the water would drain into the valley and leave behind mud and weeds. That thought stayed with him. The HOA kept building. One afternoon, Sam saw a group of them on his dock, laughing and pointing at the view. He walked down to them slowly. "This is private," he said. One woman waved her hand dismissively. "The lake is for everyone now. You can't stop us from enjoying it." Sam looked at the water. "Enjoy it while you can," he said. His words were simple, but something in his tone made them quiet. That night, Sam sat on his porch. He watched the stars above the lake. He remembered when it was calm, when only the sound of crickets filled the air. Now there were lights, noise, and strangers. He could not stop the cabins from rising, but he still held something they did not know, the key to the dam. He went to bed with a decision forming in his mind. The next day, the HOA announced the grand opening of their first row of cabins. They invited families, city officials, and even reporters. Banners waved, music played, and people cheered as the cabins were shown. The tall man in the shiny suit spoke again. This lake is ours to share, ours to profit from, and ours to protect. This is the beginning of a bright future. Sim stood at the edge of the crowd, unseen. He listened to the words, his jaw tightened. His hand brushed against the small metal key in his pocket. The key to the dam. He knew what he had to do. The morning sun broke through the trees, shining across the lake. The water sparkled. But Sam did not smile. He walked down the hill toward the dam, the old metal key resting heavy in his pocket, his boots pressed into the damp soil, each step slow and steady. He had not made this walk in weeks. The dam stood just as it always had. Its stones were gray and weathered, but strong. The iron gears, though rusted at the edges, still worked when handled with care. Sam touched the gate handle, then pulled his hand back. He did not turn it, not yet. He only stared at the rushing water below. He thought of the meeting, the cabins, the rules nailed to wooden boards. The HOA believed they controlled everything. They wanted money, power, and order. But without the dam, the lake would not last. They had built their dreams on water that could vanish. Sam sat on a flat stone and thought. His grandfather once told him, water can be a friend, but if men forget respect, it reminds them who is in charge. Sam whispered the words to himself and stood. He looked down at the valley. The creek below stretched far and winding. If the lake dropped, all that water would pour into it. The cabins would stand on dry ground, and the investors would have nothing. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and walked back to his cabin. The key stayed in his pocket, cool and waiting. That afternoon, the HOA trucks rumbled past his land again. Workers carried beams and boxes. New cabins rose on the cleared ground. The tall man in the shiny suit walked with them, pointing and giving orders. Sam stood by his fence, arms crossed. The man saw him and walked over. "You again," the man said with a smile that held no warmth. "I hope you're adjusting to the changes. This place will be famous soon. Tourists will flood in. You might even make money if you play along." Sam's eyes did not leave the man's face. "You built your cabins on my water." The man laughed. "Your water. The lake belongs to everyone now. You can't claim it as your own." Sam tilted his head slightly. "We'll see." The man's smile faded just a little, but he brushed it off. "You'll understand soon. Change is good. Don't fight it." He turned and walked away, calling to the workers again. Sam went back to his porch and sat in the old chair. His hands tightened around the armrests. The key pressed into his leg through his pocket. He thought of the water behind the dam, calm and deep, waiting for a decision. As night fell, neighbors came to visit. They were tired and worried. One woman said, "Sam, they fined me because my roof was too dark." "Can they even do that?" Another man said. "They told me I can't hang my clothes outside. They said it ruins the view for tourists." A third neighbor shook his head. "I heard they're planning to raise fees for anyone who fishes. They say it's for maintenance, but I know it's for profit." Sam listened quietly. He did not speak of the dam. He only said, "The lake does not belong to them." His voice was low, but firm. The neighbors nodded, though they did not yet know what he meant. The next day, the HOA held another event. More people arrived in cars, filling the dirt road with noise and dust. They gathered at the cabins, drinking, laughing, and taking pictures. By the water, the tall man gave another speech. "This lake is our future. With your support, we will build even more cabins, more docks, more fun. This is just the beginning." Sam stood at the back, half hidden by trees. He watched the crowd cheer. His hand reached into his pocket and touched the key again. When the event ended, Sam walked to the dam under the cover of dusk. The sky glowed orange, then purple as night came. He set down his lantern and studied the old gears. He placed the key into the lock and turned it. The click echoed against the stone. He wrapped his hands around the iron wheel that controlled the gate. For a long time, he stood still. The roar of water below called to him. If he turned the wheel, the lake would begin to drain, slowly at first, then faster. The cabins would lose their grand view. The HOA would lose their power. But he also thought of the fish, the trees, the neighbors who loved the lake. It was not only his fight. He let go of the wheel. He locked the gate again and walked home in silence. The following morning, Sam went to the town library. He searched through old records and maps. He found the papers his grandfather had signed long ago. The dam was built by a group of farmers, not by the government, not by the HOA. The papers showed that the rights to the dam were passed down, and now they belonged to Sam. He traced his finger over his grandfather's name and smiled faintly. The HOA had no idea. They thought they owned the lake, but without the dam, they owned nothing. Sam placed the papers in a folder and carried them home. He set them on his table and stared at them as the day turned to evening. The key rested beside them, shining softly. In the lamplight, the time had not yet come, but he knew it was near. Later that week, rain began to fall. The storm grew heavy, filling the streams that fed into the lake. The water level rose higher and higher. Sam checked the dam each morning. The gears groaned under the pressure, but they held. He tightened the bolts and cleared debris. He worked in silence, rain soaking through his jacket. Meanwhile, the HOA continued to build. They paid no mind to the rising water. They celebrated as if nothing could touch them. They believed the lake was their treasure. But Sam stood on the dam one night, the storm raging around him. He looked at the churning water, the dark clouds, the cabins lit by lamps across the lake. He knew the storm was only the beginning. The key in his pocket felt heavier than ever. The storm did not stop. For 3 days the sky poured rain into the valley. Thunder rolled like drums, and lightning cracked across the lake. The water swelled against the dam, higher than Sam had seen in years. The gears groaned, and the stone walls shook with the force of the flood. Sam worked each morning, tightening bolts, clearing branches, and checking the gates. He felt the power of the water pressing, always pressing. The lake was no longer calm. Its waves crashed against the shore, stealing away soil and roots from his cabin window. Sam could see the new row of houses. The HOA had painted them in bright colors, thinking they would stand as a welcome to visitors. But now the paint dripped down their sides in the rain. The cabins looked small and fragile against the storm. On the fourth night, Sam walked down to the dam with his lantern. The water had risen to the edge. Foam sprayed across the stone. He held the iron wheel and thought about turning it. If he opened the gates now, the water would rush into the valley, saving the dam from breaking. It would also empty the lake. Faster than the HOA could understand, his hand tightened on the wheel, but he did not turn it. He thought of the fish that swam in the deep waters, of the trees along the shore, of his neighbors who still loved the lake. He could not act in anger alone. The next morning, he walked into town. The storm had eased, but the clouds still hung heavy. He carried the folder of papers in his hand, the ones that proved he owned the dam. He went to the small town hall and spoke to the clerk. "These papers," Sam said, "they show my family built and owns the dam. I want them filed again, clear and official." The clerk read through the documents, then nodded. "This is valid," she said. "You hold the rights." Sam thanked her and left. He felt lighter. Now the truth was written again, clear and strong. If the HOA tried to fight him, he had proof. When he returned home, he found a group of HOA members waiting near his fence. The tall man in the shiny suit stood in front, his umbrella held high against the drizzle. "Sam," the man said, his voice smooth but sharp, "we've noticed you spending a lot of time near that dam. You understand, of course, that the lake is a community property now. Any work on the dam must go through us." Sam stepped closer, his face calm. "The dam is mine. Always has been." The man gave a short laugh. "That's not how this works. You can't claim control over what everyone uses. The HOA manages the lake now. We've invested thousands of dollars. We won't let one stubborn man get in the way." Sam pulled the folder from under his coat and opened it. "Here are the papers, signed by my grandfather, passed down to me. This dam is not yours. Without it, your cabins are nothing but wood on mud." The man's smile faltered. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the documents. Rain dripped from his umbrella onto the pages, but Sam did not move. Finally, the man closed the folder and handed it back. "We'll see what the courts say. Until then, stay away from the lake. Don't try to scare people." Sam turned his back on him and walked up the hill. The group muttered behind him. But he did not care. He knew the truth, and soon they would, too. That night, the storm returned stronger than before. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain beat down in sheets. Sam barely slept. At dawn, he hurried to the dam again. The lake was at its highest point yet. The water pounded against the gates, shaking the iron wheel. If the storm lasted one more day, the dam would not hold. Sam stood in the rain, his coat soaked through, and thought of his choices. He could open the gates and let the water spill safely into the valley. The cabins would lose their lake, and the hole would be ruined, or he could keep the gates closed, risking the dam breaking apart. If it failed, the flood would sweep everything, even his own cabin, into the valley. He gripped the wheel and leaned his weight into it. The iron moaned as it began to move. Water hissed through the crack as the gate shifted. The lake's surface rippled as it felt the pull. But before he could turn it further, a shout rose behind him. "Stop right there." Sam spun around. The tall man stood on the dam with two other HOA members. They carried flashlights, their beams cutting through the rain. "What are you doing?" the man demanded. "Are you trying to destroy everything we've built?" Sam raised his voice over the storm. "I'm keeping the dam safe. If I don't open this gate, the whole thing could break. Then the flood will take everything." The man stepped closer, his umbrella blown inside out by the wind. "You're lying. You're trying to sabotage us because you hate progress. This lake belongs to the people now, not to one old man with a key." Sam held his ground. "Without me, this dam falls. Without this dam, your cabins rot in mud. Remember that before you tell me who owns this place." The two other men moved as if to grab him, but the dam shook with a deep groan. Water surged over the top, spilling in foamy sheets. The force made them freeze in fear. Sam turned the wheel harder. The gate creaked, then gave way. A roar filled the air as water thundered out into the valley. The men stumbled back, clutching the railings. The lake began to sink, slow but steady, the storm water draining into the channel below. Sam locked the gate in its open position and faced them. "You think you built something here, but you forgot the dam. You forgot who kept this lake alive. Don't challenge what you don't understand." The tall man's face twisted with anger, but fear glimmered in his eyes. The storm howled around them, and the water raged, but Sam stood steady, his hand on the wheel, the key shining in his pocket. He had made his choice. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky cleared to a pale gray, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine. Sam walked down the hill toward the dam. His boots squished in the mud, but he paid no mind. He wanted to see what had happened after the long night. The water level had dropped, where waves once lapped against the cabins. Now a muddy shoreline stretched wide. The docks that the HOA had built leaned at strange angles. Half buried in muck, fish flopped in the shallow pools left behind, and gulls circled, crying sharply as they dove for their meal. Sam leaned on the railing of the dam and studied it all. The pressure on the gates had eased. The iron no longer groaned, and the stone stood firm. The dam had survived because he had acted. The lake was still there, but smaller now, less proud. Far across the water, movement caught his eye. A group of HOA members had gathered near the cabins, even from a distance. Sam could hear their voices rise in anger. Some pointed toward the dam. Some threw their arms in the air. The tall man in the shiny suit stood at the center, trying to calm them. But his face was red and strained. Sam knew what they were thinking. They would blame him. They would say he stole their lake, ruined their dream, destroyed their investment. He did not care. He had saved the valley from the flood. Without his action, the dam could have broken, and everything would have been worse. Later that afternoon, a few neighbors came to his cabin. They looked nervous, but their eyes carried a quiet respect. One man said, "Sam, I saw what you did. The lake would have broken through if you hadn't opened that gate. You saved the valley." Another woman nodded. My grandfather told me once that the dam keeps us all safe. You proved him right. The HOA doesn't understand that. Sam listened, then said, the lake is not gone. It will return in time. The storm filled it too fast. It needed to breathe. The neighbors seemed calmer after hearing his words. They left him with nods. But Sam noticed how they walked straighter than before, as if they felt safer knowing someone still cared for the lake. By evening, the HOA sent a messenger to his door. It was a young man, barely more than a boy, wearing a slick jacket. He held out a paper. This is a notice, the boy said nervously. You are ordered to stop interfering with HOA property. If you touch the dam again, you'll face legal action. Sam took the paper, read it once, then folded it neatly and placed it on his table. Tell them the dam is mine, he said simply. The boy nodded quickly and hurried away. That night, Sam sat on his porch, watching the moonlight stretch across the half-drained lake. The cabin stood silent, their lights dark. He could almost feel the anger across the water, the frustration of people who had thought themselves powerful but now stood helpless. The next morning, the HOA gathered in full force. Cars lined the dirt road, and men in suits shouted orders while workers tried to clean the mud from the shore. But no matter how much they shoveled or swept, the water would not return. Without closing the dam's gates, the lake would remain shallow, and only Sam had the key. The tall man marched up to Sam's fence that afternoon. His shoes sank into the wet earth, and his suit was splattered with mud, but he ignored it. You've gone too far, the man shouted. You think you can ruin everything we've built? You think you can drain our lake just because you want to be stubborn? Sam stood calmly, arms folded. I didn't ruin anything. I saved the dam from breaking. If you had your way, there would be no dam left, no cabins, no lake, just destruction. The man's eyes blazed. This isn't over. We'll take this to court. We'll take it to the county. We'll take it to anyone who will listen. Sam walked to his porch and returned with the folder of papers. He held it out. Take it to whoever you want. These say the dam belongs to me. The land, the gates, the water it holds back. You can't take what isn't yours. The man did not take the folder. His jaw tightened and his hand shook at his sides. Finally, he spat out, "You regret this." Then he turned and stormed away, splashing mud with each step. Sam did not answer. He watched the man go, then placed the folder back on his table. He knew the HOA would not stop easily. They were too proud, too greedy. They had put money and power into their dream, and they would not accept that one man with a key could undo it all. But Sam also knew he held the truth. The dam was his, and no paper from the HOA could change that. The days passed. The lake grew smaller each day, shrinking to its natural shape before the storm had swelled it. The muddy shores dried into cracked ground, leaving behind the stumps of trees long drowned beneath the water. Children from the town came to explore, laughing as they found old bottles, tools, and even the remains of a wagon buried under years of silt. The cabins looked strange now. They had been built for tourists who wanted a shining lake at their doors. Now they stood over dry mud, their docks stretching uselessly into nothing. Some of the neighbors began to whisper that the HOA had lost its power. Without the lake, their rules and fines meant little. No one wanted to pay for a cabin that looked out on dirt. No one cared about permits for fishing when there were no fish near the shore. One evening, an older man from the town came to visit Sam. His name was Thomas, and he had lived in the valley as long as Sam could remember. He sat on the porch with Sam and looked out at the shrinking water. "You've done something they didn't expect," Thomas said. "You reminded them that nature doesn't bow to money. They thought they owned the lake, but the lake was never theirs. It was held by that dam, and that dam was held by you." Sam nodded but said nothing. He kept his eyes on the horizon where the last glow of sunlight touched the water. The HOA was quiet for a time after that, but Sam knew their silence was not peace. He knew they would plan again, scheme again, try again, and when they did, he would be ready. The key rested in his pocket, cool and solid, the true weight of the lake in his hand. The next morning, Sam woke to the sound of engines from his porch. He could see trucks lined up along the dirt road. Men in suits and workers in uniforms spilled out, carrying boxes of papers, measuring tools, and cameras. The HOA had returned, not with hammers and saws, but with lawyers and surveyors. Sam stepped outside, his hands resting lightly on the gate of his porch. The tall man in the shiny suit was at the front, holding a thick folder. His eyes scanned the property as if looking for weaknesses, but Sam stood calm. "You've been warned." The man called. "We have the law on our side now. These papers from town hall may prove something, but we have legal claims, permits, and documents showing the lake is community property. Today, we settle this." Sam nodded. "I've read your documents. None of them say you own the dam. None of them control what happens here. You are welcome to try, but the truth is clear." The HOA members moved closer, cameras flashing. Lawyers unrolled maps, gesturing and pointing at the lake, trying to make a case. They measured boundaries, compared plots, and muttered calculations. Sam watched silently. He did not need maps. He knew every inch of the lake, every stone in the dam, every path through the valley. One of the lawyers stepped forward, holding a paper high. "According to this, you are interfering with community property. If you continue, you will be liable for damages, fines, and legal penalties. The HOA will take this to court." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Interfering? I saved the dam from breaking. You should be thanking me." The lawyer blinked, clearly unprepared for that answer. The tall man slammed his folder on a truck. "Enough talking. We are taking measurements now. We want proof of your interference." Sam did not move. Instead, he walked toward the dam. Rain from the previous storm still lingered in the clouds, leaving small puddles along the paths. He checked the iron wheel. It had not moved since he opened the gate during the storm. The dam held firm. The lake was smaller, but safe. "Look," Sam said, gesturing toward the water. "The lake is stable. The dam is intact. You built your cabins on its edge, thinking it would always serve you. But without this gate, your lake would not exist, and now it is protected. That is not interference. That is care." The tall man's face darkened. "You think you can argue your way out of this. You are only one man. We are many. We have money, lawyers, and permits. You cannot win." Sam smiled faintly. "I do not need to win a fight with words. I only need the truth, and the truth is on my side." By mid-morning, the surveyors began taking pictures of the dam, the water, and Sam's cabin. They measured distances, wrote notes, and whispered among themselves. But the more they tried to document the property, the more obvious it became that their cabins were in the wrong place. Some were built on land that flooded in the past, some too close to the dam's walls, and some on ground that belonged to neighbors who had not sold any rights. One surveyor muttered, "We can't use this as proof. Most of this land is under the dam's control." The tall man overheard him and frowned. "Focus on the lake. Focus on the water. We need evidence that he is interfering with our plans." Sam shook his head. "You cannot interfere with something that is not yours. The water does not belong to your folders, your lawyers, or your meetings. It belongs to the dam. The dam belongs to me. That is why it still stands." Hours passed. The HOA grew frustrated. They tried measuring, documenting, and photographing, but the more they worked, the more they realized their position was weak. Without controlling the dam, they could not claim ownership of the lake. Their permits were meaningless when the water's level was protected by Sam. By late afternoon, the tall man stepped back, fuming. "You may have a dam, but this is not over. We will be in court. We will fight until you are forced to open or hand over the gates." Sam looked at him calmly. "You can try, but remember, the gates only move when I allow them to. You cannot force water where it does not belong." The HOA left that evening, but the tension lingered. Sam walked the edge of the lake, checking the wooden docks and the cabin's foundations. Some of the mud had dried into cracks, making the cabins look fragile. He thought about the storm, the gate, and the key in his pocket. Neighbors came again to his cabin that evening. They spoke quietly about what they had seen. "Sam, you showed them." One woman said, "They thought they could control everything, but you reminded them they cannot." Another neighbor nodded. "They will try again." but we will back you up. You have saved our lake, our homes, and our land." They cannot ignore that. Sam thanked them, but he knew it was not enough. The HOA had money, lawyers, and determination. They would return with new plans, new threats, and new challenges. The fight was far from over. That night, Sam sat on his porch, the key resting in his pocket. He listened to the wind moving through the trees and the water moving gently below the dam. He thought of what might come next: lawsuits, negotiations, or even more attempts to force the gates open. But he also thought of the truth: without the dam, the lake could vanish, and without him, the dam could fail. He decided he would not move the gates unless the valley demanded it. He would protect the lake, the land, and his neighbors. The next morning, Sam walked to the dam. The water had returned slightly after the storm drained. Filling some of the shallow areas, fish returned. Birds came back, and the valley seemed calmer. He turned the wheel slightly to adjust the flow. Careful not to drain too much, he smiled. The dam held, and the lake lived. Across the water, the cabins reflected the sunlight. The HOA members were quiet, staring at the smaller lake. They realized the power they had assumed did not exist. Their control was an illusion. The lake answered only to the dam, and the dam answered only to Sam for the first time in days. Sam felt a small satisfaction. He had stood against a group that believed money and influence could control nature. He had proven that one careful, determined person could hold the line. The battle was not over, but the first round was won. Weeks passed since the last confrontation. The lake had settled into a lower, safer level. Held firmly by the dam, Sam kept a close watch, walking along the edges, inspecting the gates, and making small adjustments to the flow of water. The valley seemed calmer now, the cabins standing awkwardly along the muddy shoreline. The HOA had not returned in force, but Sam knew it was only a matter of time. One morning, Sam noticed a group of their workers near the first row of cabins. They were attempting to repair the docks and fill in the mud with sand and gravel. The workers looked tired, frustrated, and uncertain. Sam approached slowly, keeping a careful distance. "Hello," he said. "You know the lake will not rise higher unless the dam allows it." The foreman looked up, startled. "We were told to fix this, but the water is too low. We can't make it look like before." Sam nodded. "Exactly. No matter what you do, the lake follows the dam. If the gates remain open, this is the new level. Build your cabins and docks here or wait for permission. But understand it will take time for the water to return." The foreman muttered something under his breath and turned back to the sandbags. Sam left quietly. He had no need to argue with workers. The truth was already obvious. That afternoon, the HOA sent another message. This time it was a letter delivered by certified mail. Sam opened it carefully. The HOA demanded he close the gates immediately, restore the lake to its original height, and cease all control over the dam. They warned of lawsuits, penalties, and claims of interference with community property. Sam read the letter twice, then placed it in a drawer. He smiled faintly. They still did not understand. Legal threats meant nothing when the facts were clear. The dam belonged to him, and the gates only moved when he allowed them. As the days grew warmer, Sam noticed something interesting. The water levels had revealed parts of the lake that had been hidden for decades. Shallow banks that once held nothing now exposed logs, stones, and old paths. Neighbors began exploring these areas. Children discovered small fish trapped in puddles, while older residents found places to sit and enjoy the quiet that had been lost under deeper waters. Sam realized something. The lower lake had not ruined the valley. It had changed it in a way that made people see it differently. The HOA had wanted control, profit, and a polished lakefront. They had not considered the natural flow of the water, the history, or the people who lived there. One evening, Sam heard voices behind his cabin. He stepped outside and saw a few neighbors standing near the fence. "Sam, we want to thank you," one woman said. "The lake feels safer now. The cabins look small, but the valley is alive again. We didn't realize how fragile the water really was." But another man added, "We thought the HOA would bring progress, but they didn't see the danger. "You protected us," Sam nodded quietly. "The dam has always done its job. I just make sure it works properly. That is all." As night fell, Sam checked the gates one last time. The water flowed steadily, the lake calm but lower than before. The storm had passed weeks ago, and the valley seemed to breathe again. He touched the iron wheel lightly, thinking about the power he held. Not power for himself, but power to protect the land, the water, and the people who cared for it. A few days later, the HOA returned, this time with lawyers and surveyors. They attempted to measure the lake, arguing that Sam was controlling too much of the water and violating regulations. Sam met them at the dam. "You cannot measure what does not belong to you," he said calmly. "The lake obeys the gates, and the gates obey me. You cannot force water where it is not meant to go." The lawyers flipped through folders, muttering. The surveyors measured distances, checked elevations, and even tried to test the gates. Nothing worked. Every step they took only confirmed what Sam had always known. By late afternoon, the tall man in the shiny suit finally admitted defeat. His face was red with frustration. "This is absurd. We will take this to court. We will not give up." Sam nodded. "Take it to court if you wish. The facts do not lie. The dam belongs to me, and I will act only to protect it and the valley." The HOA left once again, their confidence shaken. They would continue to plot, but Sam knew the lake was safe for now. As the weeks turned into months, something remarkable happened. The lower lake allowed plants to grow along the newly exposed banks. Birds returned to nest in areas that had been underwater for decades. Neighbors discovered walking paths and picnic areas that had been hidden beneath the deep lake. The valley seemed more alive than before. The HOA had built cabins along the shore. Sam walked along one of these new paths, watching children play near small pools of water, fish jumping in shallow streams, and families enjoying the quiet. He felt a sense of satisfaction. The valley had not been ruined by the storm, nor by the HOA's ambitions. It had been renewed. One evening, he walked to the dam and turned the wheel slightly, adjusting the water flow. The lake rose just enough to keep the fish alive and the banks moist, but not enough to flood the cabins or the shore. He smiled faintly, knowing that the valley had found a balance. The HOA had returned with plans, threats, and legal claims, but they had learned something important. Money and authority could not control nature, and ambition could not ignore the power of care and knowledge. Sam returned to his cabin as the sun set, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. The lake reflected the colors, calm and steady. He looked at the key in his pocket and felt a quiet pride. He had protected his home, the valley, and the neighbors who relied on the lake, for the first time since the storm. Sam allowed himself a deep breath. He knew challenges would come again, but the valley had survived. The dam had held. The lake had adapted, and he had proven that one person with wisdom, patience, and care could stand against even the strongest opposition. As darkness fell, Sam sat on his porch, watching the lake. The cabins remained along the shore, their owners frustrated and unsettled, while the valley thrived in quiet harmony. The storm had passed, the fight had been fought, and for now, the lake was safe. Spring had arrived in the valley. Flowers bloomed along the newly revealed banks. Birds sang in the trees, and the gentle flow of the lake created a soft rhythm that filled the air. Sam walked along the shore, listening to the quiet peace he had worked to protect. The dam had held, the lake had stabilized, and the valley was alive once again. The HOA had not returned in force for weeks. Their threats and lawsuits had slowed, as they realized that without the dam, their claims were empty. Sam knew the fight was not over entirely, but the power balance had shifted. He now held the key literally and figuratively to the lake. In the valley, one afternoon, a small group of HOA members arrived, this time with calm expressions. The tall man in the shiny suit led them, holding a folder with legal documents. Sam met them at the dam, standing firmly on the stone walkway, the iron wheel steady under his hands. "We've come to negotiate," the man said. "We understand. Now that the dam belongs to you, we want to reach an agreement, so there is no further conflict." Sam listened quietly. His eyes studied the man and the group. He had no desire for revenge. He only wanted the valley, the lake, and the community to remain safe. What kind of agreement? Sam asked. The man took a deep breath. We will build only what the land and lake can support. No more cabins near the water's edge. We will respect the dam, and we will follow your guidance for water management. In return, we ask permission to maintain the cabins we have already built under your supervision. Sam considered their words. He knew this would protect the valley while allowing some compromise. I will allow it, he said finally, but you must respect the land, the water, and the people who live here. If you break that trust, the gates remain under my control, and the lake will not rise for your cabins. The HOA members nodded quickly. Relief and respect were visible in their expressions. They understood the authority Sam held, and for the first time, they seemed willing to follow it. Over the next few weeks, Sam worked with the HOA to create boundaries. The cabins that were too close to the water were moved or removed, and docks were rebuilt in safer locations. New paths were made along the lake for neighbors to enjoy, and shallow banks were restored for wildlife. The valley began to thrive. Again, cleaner, safer, and more beautiful than it had been before. Neighbors came to help. Children planted flowers along the banks. Families built small benches, and the community started to take pride in the renewed lake. Sam walked among them, offering guidance and encouragement. The valley was no longer just a place to live. It was a shared space where everyone had a voice. One morning, the storm clouds from months ago returned briefly, but this time Sam was ready. He adjusted the gates carefully, allowing the water to rise slightly without risking the dam. The lake responded, filling the shallow areas and flowing steadily. The cabins remained safe, the banks firm, and the valley alive. The HOA observed. Quietly, they no longer tried to assert control. They had learned that money, papers, and threats could not dominate the power of careful planning and respect for nature. That evening, Sam walked to the dam, the key in his pocket shining softly. In the lamplight, he looked across the lake and saw the neighbors walking along the banks, children laughing as they splashed in shallow water. Birds circled above, and the wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth. He thought about the journey, the storm, the flooded lake, the conflict with the HOA, and the months of careful management. Every challenge had taught him patience, strategy, and the importance of protecting what mattered most. Sam sat on the stone edge of the dam and turned the wheel slightly, letting the water flow gently. The lake responded perfectly, steady and calm. He smiled faintly. The valley was safe, the water alive, and the community thriving. Later, the tall man approached quietly. "Thank you," he said simply. "We tried to take control, but we see now that it was not our place. You have protected the lake, the land, and the people. We will follow your guidance from now on." Sam nodded. "I only ask that you respect it. The lake is alive, and it will continue to flow. Work with it, not against it." The man extended his hand. Sam shook it firmly, for the first time. The tall man's expression held genuine respect. The fight had ended, not with anger or destruction, but with understanding. Weeks passed. The HOA settled into their new boundaries. The valley flourished. Fish returned to the shallow banks. Trees grew taller along the edge, and flowers bloomed brightly. Neighbors built small gardens, walking paths, and places to enjoy the water. Children played freely, and families picnicked along the shore. Sam walked each day, checking the gates, adjusting the water, and ensuring the balance was maintained. He felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that he had protected not only his home, but the entire valley. The lake reflected the sunset, calm and alive, a mirror of the peace that had finally settled over the land. One evening, as Sam sat on his porch, the key resting in his pocket, he looked across the water and smiled. The valley was thriving, the cabins were safe, and the HOA had accepted their place. The fight was over, and harmony had returned. The lake, the dam, and the valley were finally at peace, and Sam knew that as long as he watched over them, they would remain that way. The community was stronger, the land healthier, and the valley Alive, Sam had won, not through anger, but through wisdom, patience, and care. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in orange and pink. The water shimmered gently, birds called softly, and the wind whispered through the trees. Sam leaned back in his chair, feeling the calm that comes after a storm. Knowing that the lake would continue to flow, the valley would continue to thrive, and the community would remember that one person's care could make all the difference. The key in his pocket was a reminder, not of control, but of responsibility. The dam was his, but the valley belonged to everyone who respected it, and for the first time in months, Sam felt complete peace. The HOA had learned, the neighbors had learned, and the valley had survived. The fight for the lake was over, and life in the valley had found its balance once again.